Hello and welcome to the Secret Cabal YouTube channel. I'm Steve and today I'll be rattling off 10 of my favorite games, building up to my top 50. That's the topic of this video, the 50 games I think are the greatest. I'm going to be coming at you Monday through Friday, just like your job, but hopefully a little shorter and a lot more fun. Stick around. Wits and Wagers. I'm going to start off with a fun one here. You don't see very many trivia games on top 50 lists, so I'm here to break that trend with Wits and Wagers. Now this is kind of a party trivia game with a twist. So in Wits and Wagers you have a board out with different betting lines, and a question is asked, and people produce answers for it. And you're not betting on whether your answer is correct or not, or you don't have to. You're betting on who you think is correct, or if somebody's wrong, or, there's so many different combinations of bets you can make, and that's what's fun. You don't have to be good at trivia to play this game. You just have to be able to play the crowd, know what they're up to, anticipate whether they're right or not, and you can throw some red herrings in there yourself by, if, say, you know the answer to a question, you think other people know, you give a wrong answer and bet on somebody else. So, all in all, this is a great fun party game. I like the trivia questions, they're fun, and I like trivia games in general, so I enjoy this rendition, Wits and Wagers. AZUL. Alright, my number 49 is AZUL. Now, you may have seen this game recently. It's pretty popular, it's at most conventions, and it seems to be available everywhere, and that's because it's a lot of fun. So this is basically a set collection game, but it's also making patterns. You're decorating a stained glass window or something somewhere in Portugal in AZUL. That's kind of the backstory I got. But anyway, the gameplay is what drew me to it, not the story.
Steve, did you say that AZUL is a city?
Isn't it? Or a church or something?
No. It's the Spanish word for blue.
Seriously? Shit. This is fun because all the pieces you have to pick from are laid out in front of you in a circle, and the players go around and they grab a stack of those. Now, you're trying to match them up to patterns on your little tableau for scoring purposes. And there's a variety of different scoring patterns. You can have horizontal, vertical. It tells you on the tableau. But you don't just need one type. You need all the different types. So the collections that you form is really tough because people might take the stack you wanted, so you have to come up with a plan B. And that's what's fun, because this game is easy to learn, easy to play, and it requires a little on-the-go thinking. All in all, I'd say it's a lot of fun. Number 49, AZUL. Twilight Imperium. Coming in at number 48, we have Twilight Imperium, which, little known fact, is Portuguese for stained glass. Now, what I like about Twilight Imperium, it is a 4X game. You're exploring, you're exterminating, you're doing the other X's, lots of X's going on here. But in this has asymmetric play, which is one of my favorite aspects of a game. Each race has their own different powers. So you start on this space map, and you start on a planet, and there's neighboring planets, and depending on how many other players, there could be a lot of competition for that. You need to build up your fleet, you need to do some research, you need to go out, secure planets, and defeat the enemies, or form alliances with them. What you do and how you play is up to you. What I think is fun about this game is when you get into a good big fleet battle, and you win. That is an amazing feeling. You've just annihilated your enemy, and you are primed to push on, and it just triggers the good feelings in the brain. They just flow down. And that makes the whole extremely long game worth it, those little moments. The game, all in all, is fun too, but it's those little bits that you really look forward to. And that's why I love Twilight Imperium. MYTHOTOPIA. Coming in at number 47 today, we have MYTHOTOPIA. This is a fun area control game where you play a lord or a king or what have you in this land, and you're trying to take over. You have other players or the enemies. And what I think is fun about this, it has a risk-like element to it in the beginning that your territories are distributed randomly. Although there is a variant in the back that you can draft them, which is a lot of fun too, because I love drafting mechanics. But what I find fun about this game, and Risk to a lesser degree, is that you don't know the state of the board until you get what territory you control. So you could be set up great, or you could be all spread out. And your enemy's the same thing. You could be all spread out, and some of your opponents are all clustered together. And yeah, that's not necessarily fair, but it certainly makes for a challenge. And I love the fact that you don't know what you're getting into until that's all dealt out. Now, after that, you move around, secure the area. You could work with some other players if you like or not. But to me, actually, the fun in this game is the startup, where you see what's going on, you try to work with it, make the best of it, and then you try to succeed against all odds. So check it out, MYTHOTOPIA. Lords of XIDIT. All right, coming in at number 46, we have Lords of XIDIT. Now, this is a colorful game with a lot of little minis in there, and you are basically roaming the map and defeating monsters and getting points. Now, the interesting part of this is it is mechanism planning, or you're planning your turn out. So you have different characters that move around the board, and you tell them what actions they're to take that turn. And you don't know what actions the other players are going to do, so your plans could go totally wrong. Perhaps another player kills the monster you're getting at right before you show up, and there's nothing for you to do. So the fun in this game is I love movement planning, action planning ahead of time. That is so much fun because you have to anticipate what your enemies are going to do. If you see that the person next to you looks like they're really going for this one particular monster on the board or this one area on the board, you might want to get out of there, avoid it, or maybe you know a way that you can beat them there and screw them up. And that's fun because the whole game, you're just sitting there looking at the board, calculating what you can do, trying to figure out what your enemy's going to do, and then you just try to beat them. And, that makes this game replayable because every game's different. I love it. Lords of XIDIT. Nemesis. Coming in at 45 today, we have a new game, newer anyway, and it's one that is near and dear to my heart, and that is Nemesis. Now, this game reminds me so much of some of my favorite horror movies, like Alien and Aliens. Those were great. I loved them growing up as a kid. Jamie and I watched them all the time, and this game kind of captures the feel of that. So it is what I'd call an adventure game, or like a dungeon crawl on a spaceship of the sorts, but you wake up on your ship, and you have no memory what happened before you went in cryo sleep. So you can't remember, where certain rooms are on the ship. You don't have the layout of the ship memorized anymore. So half of the game is exploring and flipping those tiles over to see what's going on, where you are in the ship, where the things you need are. Meanwhile, you've got a mission you're trying to complete. You can't win this game until you beat this mission, but you get two to choose from, right? So if one of them really isn't your speed, pick the other. Meanwhile, aliens are brewing, and they're popping up here and there. When you generate noise going through rooms, walking around, unless you're silently moving, it could trigger an alien attack. And that's why you have weapons. Part of the game is you're going around collecting equipment, gearing up, so when you run into those aliens, you can put them down. Now, once you've succeeded the mission, hop back in cryo sleep, you find out if your ship made it or not. You find out if you've succeeded in your personal mission or not, and you decide if you win the game or not. One negative about this is it has player elimination. That said, the first person to die, they can become the alien player with a variant in the rulebook. So they are not just sitting there doing nothing. The second player that dies, well, try not to die. Anyway, I think it's a lot of fun. If you're into dungeon crawl and the movie Aliens, you're going to love it. Rising Sun. Number 44 on my list is Rising Sun. Now, this was a big game on Kickstarter. It made boatloads of money. I think they're still sitting on piles of it somewhere at the Simon warehouse. But this is a war game in feudal Japan with asymmetric powers. Each player is a different clan, and they have a different ability, which, if they're good players, will use that to try to get the advantage over the rest of the players. You want to play on your strengths, not your weaknesses. And just in case you have weaknesses that you're not so good at dealing with, you can ally up with other people. So there's negotiation, there's alliances, there's warfare. And this game is not about camping. You can't just take root in a province like so many other games. You have to move because you can only score an area once per game. So between all the negotiating, it's a very replayable game. The warfare aspect of it is fun too. It's easy to come back if your army's been wiped out. But collecting the monsters and just building your team, that's what makes this game fun. And, just executing a well-planned attack pays off in spades. I love it. Twilight Struggle. Number 43 is Twilight Struggle. This is an older game, but it's still relevant today because it's so fun. This game takes place during the Cold War from roughly the 60s to the 80s, the United States versus the Soviet Union conflict in the Cold War, with the rest of the world being the battlegrounds. So in this war, it's a war of influence. You're trying to gain influence over these different countries around the map. And to do that, you have different cards. Now, it's interesting because the cards are the same dealt to both players, but some of them might not really be good for you. They're more meant for the opponent, and the same with them. What I find fun about this is the fact that you could get a card that you can't really use. So there are alternate things you can use. You can use that to put extra influence out. You don't have to play the power that's on the card, but sometimes it's fun to get one of those cards because you've denied the enemy. They don't have it. But if you play that card, well, they're going to get to use that power. So it is important to judge what is at stake and whether you want to play or not. Play the particular card or not. This is a very replayable game with the way the cards are distributed. And the part I think is fun is figuring out when you're going to situationally use each card, because you don't necessarily know what area of the world is going to be scored next. So a lot of this game is played on the fly. Now, I'll say that the initial setup and the part of the first round is very formulaic, but once you get past that, perhaps the rest of the game, I think it's a ebb and a flow. There's a lot going on. And that's why it's fun. And that's why it's still being played today. Twilight Struggle. HORUS, HERESY. Number 42 for me is HORUS, HERESY. Now, this is a Warhammer 40,000 game. The theme is set around a time where the Space Marines and the Chaos Space Marines kind of split, and there's a lot of civil war going on between them. If you're not familiar with the Warhammer 40,000 lore, that's pretty much all you need to know. There's these two opposing factions that are fighting on this planet. Now, this is a war game, and there's a lot of cards being played. There's a lot of cards being played face down over the board that you don't know what they are if the opponent has played it until they flip. So that adds a lot of strategy too. Your opponent's playing a lot of cards in one area. Maybe you should pull your troops out. Maybe he's planning an offensive or some sort of bombing. So the game, again, and this is very reactional too, because you're not really sure what your opponent has planned. You don't want to get caught in some kind of trap. But at the same time, you want to win. So you need to be pushing it. Key areas, you need to try to take the enemy's units out and try to wrap this game up. It's fun. There's nothing better for me, fun-wise, than when I'm playing an enemy and I just perform a strategy they didn't see coming and I just wipe them out in an area. That is great. Anyway, I think it's fun. I think you'll think it's fun too. This game's been out for a bit, but it's still good. Conan. Number 41, and rounding out my list today is Conan. Most of you may know Conan from Arnold Schwarzenegger playing him in the 1980s movies, but originally he was written by Robert E. Howard in a series of books. He's kind of like the first, maybe not the first, but one of the first D&D type guys. He's in this high fantasy setting. He's going out on adventures. He's fighting monsters. So this board game captures that element. Not so much the Arnold Schwarzenegger element. Each scenario in this book, and there's quite a few of them, are different. They have different rules, different settings. This is basically a dungeon crawl type game. And it's a campaign game too, but you don't level up. You just proceed to the different scenarios and work your way through them. And there's a console here, or one player that is controlling the monsters, which is also fun to do because they have a revolving track that you can put the different monsters on. If you want to pull a more powerful monster out, you might have to pay a little more, but if you're doing that, you probably need them, so it's a worthy investment. As the players, they have to work together to try to overcome the console and complete whatever the objectives are. Now, this game has amazing miniatures. It has a great board. I mean, the scenarios are fun. They're very thematic. They make me think of the stories I read that were the Conan stories. So Listen, this game might be a little pricey because of all the miniatures and everything, but if you're into dungeon crawls and you like Conan, this is a no-brainer, and it's fun. Alright, well thanks for watching my first segment of my top 50. Come back tomorrow. I'm gonna wow you with another 10. Make sure you get your seatbelts tightened up for that one.
Thanks so much, everybody. If you've enjoyed this video, please do us a giant favor by subscribing to the channel and clicking that wacky bell icon. If you're into board games, miniatures games, role-playing games, we have a bunch of audio podcasts you might enjoy. You can find those at thesecretcabal.com or on iTunes and Stitcher.